Hi, Rowena.
Hi, Andy. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. You're well?
Yeah, all good, thank you.
Thanks very much for taking the time to speak to me today.
You're welcome.
Can I start by asking you to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, you can. I'm Rowena Kerslake. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive of YMCA Trinity Group. I used to be the Chief Executive of YMCA Suffolk, and then when we expanded to take in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, I stepped back to being the Deputy CEO. Yeah, my life with YMCA has been busy since 1998, so I'm a veteran of the YMCA, and primarily in Suffolk, the YMCA works with children and young people and their families, and we do that through childcare centres, through youth groups, through our accommodation with young people, young parents. We do have a health and wellbeing programme which includes mental health. So we pretty much cover everything to do with families, children and young people.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing more about what you've been doing over the next few minutes. So I've got 4 questions for you, and the first one is a sort of personal one. Is how have you been looking after yourself during the pandemic?
Well, it's been an interesting time, hasn't it? I mean, I had been working from home a couple of days a week anyway, so I'd had a little bit of experience of working from home. But when we were kind of forced into working from home, it was a real learning curve, I think. Working from home 2 days a week is very different to having to work from home 5 days a week. And I think I threw myself into it with gusto and worked too hard for quite a long time. And I think I felt like I should be on call all the time, that I should be at the end of a Zoom meeting or the end of a Teams meeting at every moment of the day. And you know, my calendar should be full, and you know, I should be doing stuff all the time. Whereas if you compare that with an office-based day, you might get up and make yourself a coffee and go and have a chat with people, and you know, your work day is not looking at a screen 9 hours a day. So I learnt from that. It was a learning experience, definitely. I started to take some time out for myself because I realised that I wasn't working effectively doing that. Although I felt I should be, it wasn't making me a better worker in any shape or form, and I wasn't being there for my staff. I was just being there for the sake of being online by my screen. So walking, cycling, you know, doing some stuff outside. I'm fortunate to have a garden, so I was able to just get out and sit in the garden sometimes, and do reading and you know, sort of catch up with things for work that didn't require me to sit at my computer. It took me quite a long time to think about my annual leave, because it feels bizarrely wrong to take annual leave when you're sitting at home working. It kind of, the two things don't quite go together. But I realised that I took a long weekend, and I realised that I desperately needed time off. That I was tired. I'd been working non-stop for nearly 5 months, and I needed some time off. And I was going to just take a week at the end of August to sort of regenerate. And I thought, no, actually, take a fortnight, take 2 weeks off. And I think it took me about 3 or 4 days to just slow down and stop thinking about work, because it's been so intense that I couldn't switch off. So you know, I think taking a couple of weeks was definitely the thing to do. I've tried to recreate a little bit of what I would have in the office. So like I said, stopping for a coffee, but then just having a chat with someone rather than having a meeting with them, just stopping by their virtual desk, if you like, and just saying, you know, how's things at home, and just talking nonsense, really, not talking work. And I think that's been quite good. I've recognised some anxiety in me, which I didn't even know existed, I think, while I was during this time. I think being at home, I think initially I watched too much news and picked up too much stuff to worry about, and so I've been quite reflective on that, and I think that's been quite helpful for me as well, because I'm sometimes I can be a bit of a bull at a gate and just go for things, and I never think of things failing. I'm just really positive about everything, so I've had to learn to be much more reflective and slow things down, and just do things a little bit more in a calmer way, and not get hyped up by stuff. So I think generally, I think by reflecting, it's given me a much better picture of how to behave from a work point of view in this situation, and that makes me able to support my staff a lot better as well. I think, to help them to work in a better way, and I've learned from them as well. I've seen some really good models of people working from home, and obviously the YMCA has been open the whole time because we had residents who needed a home, and support workers. We've had childcare open, so our staff have been in work in a variety of different bubbles and shifts and all sorts, and so it's that in itself has given me some learning as well about the way that I work, and how I can look after myself as well.
It's interesting that even though you were working 2 days a week prior to this, it was still a steep learning curve for you. But
yeah.
You've learned and you've reflected, which is really good. But I completely get this. It's almost a guilt about taking annual leave, isn't it? I concur with that.
Yeah.
I love the talking nonsense bit as well. That's
I do that quite a lot of the time anyway, so it's quite easy for me.
Thank you. Okay, my second question is this. So how do you lead your organisation differently in a completely unknown and untested situation such as this?
Yeah, I think it's been a really interesting time to review leadership, because I've been a chief exec since 2001, so I'm pretty long in the tooth, and understand leadership and leading an organisation. And this has kind of thrown it all up in the air and made me think again, which has been a pleasurable thing in terms of reviewing, because I think you are who you are, and you tend to do things in the way that you do them. And if they're reasonably successful, you don't think to check in with yourself and sort of change who you are or whatever. So this has been, as I said about looking after myself, it's been a real learning curve, and I think it has given me some really positive things to take away from it. So I think the first thing I'd say about that is that leadership brings responsibility and influence, and those two things are side by side. You can influence the way your organisation goes. You can influence the culture. You can influence the way that your staff think and work. But that brings a huge responsibility with it, and I think that during this time we've really had to question what our responsibility as leaders has been, and what influence we've had on people, and how much we have listened to our staff as well. So it's been, I think it's been a much more two-way street. And I think I'm quite an inclusive leader. I like to do things collaboratively and talk to, get groups of staff together to talk things through. I'm not autocratic in any shape or form, but it's just made me stop and think about my responsibility as a leader and how that plays out. I do tend to, sometimes I tend to think something and speak it, and this has been an opportunity to think at least twice about something, because about an action, when you're taking action on something, to try and think it through, then think it through again, talk to people about it, because sometimes what I would normally have said or done has not fitted the circumstance in this pandemic time. I think it's really important that if you've made the wrong decision, that you can say, sorry, I've made the wrong decision. I think it's really good to be able to admit that you're in the wrong and, you know, give your reasons for being in the wrong. But it's good to say sorry. I think it's good for your staff to see that you can take a step back and reflect and go, actually, that wasn't the right thing to do. We've done that wrong. For me, it's been quite important to have a good group of people as a sounding board, both internally and externally. So as an exec team, we've met very regularly, at least once a week, sometimes more, to just run stuff past each other in our various bits of work. And that's been really good. I think it's been helpful to be able to just to work as a real team. There's 5 of us in our exec team, and it's been really good to work as that team. But it's also been really good to talk to people externally. So I think leadership is not a lonely thing. It shouldn't be a lonely thing. It should be a collaborative thing. And we've been meeting as VCS leaders in Suffolk, and that's been really helpful. Even if you don't say anything in the meeting, it's been really helpful to hear everybody else's views and appreciate, you know, other people are going through the same things as you. I feel a bit like I'm an anchor for an enormous ship, but without weighing it down. So the YMCA is, you know, now we've joined with Cambridge and Peterborough. It's a big beast. We're you know, our turnover is more than 11 million now, and what we wanted to do was stay stable in this period, so that we didn't make people feel more anxious than they needed to. And so I think as a leader of the organisation, I have felt like I should be an anchor to stop us wobbling, but not an anchor to hold us in one place throughout. So that we could move quite freely, but we wouldn't shake about and make everybody feel more anxious. I think part of a leader's job is to analyse the situation and the impact that this is going to have on our future, which I think has been incredibly difficult. It's not an easy thing to analyse. I think, you know, there's been a lot of people that have been trying to analyse the future of the voluntary sector, for example, and I think it's very difficult to predict. I think we can predict that, you know, funding is going to be less and preventative work is going to be less and all that sort of thing. But for us as an individual organisation, it's quite difficult to predict the exact route. We have to set the direction based on our predictions of the future. But I think we have to also be prepared as leaders to change direction if we've kind of picked the wrong direction, or we see that something isn't as necessary in that direction as in this direction, for example. So I think, you know, like I say, we need to be prepared to change direction. One of the big things I think is that it's given us an opportunity to evaluate our structures and our procedures. So for me, I've always said that people can work from home very successfully. There are some people that say, oh no, I need all my staff in the office, I need to be able to see them and whatever. And I think this has been a real wake-up call to people to say, actually, our organisation has had 60% of its staff working from home very successfully. It saved us money on travel expenses, an inordinate amount of money on travel expenses. People don't all need to be in the same room to have a meeting. You know, we've learned a lot from that in terms of our structures, and some of those things we definitely will carry on doing going forward. We definitely will pick that up. But I think as a leader, that's been, you know, a learning curve and a very interesting one.
Clearly, you've been both personally and as an organisation on the front foot, ready to adapt and learn, and for any given circumstances. And as you know, we know that every week, almost every day, there's a change in the situation. But it's also interesting how you've adapted yourself and your leadership and the way that you conduct what it is that you do as a deputy CEO of such a large organisation. I hadn't realised it was so large. So the third question is this: how have the families and the young people you work with coped through the last few months?
Gosh, it's been difficult for them, really difficult. I mean, our young people in our accommodation have multiple problems usually. They don't just live with us because they choose to live with us. You know, they've come to us because they've been identified by the counsellors as homeless or potentially homeless. They're care leavers who need somewhere to go with support. They're unaccompanied asylum seeker children who need support to carry on with their journey. And they often have some elements of poor mental health, sometimes very serious, sometimes just underlying. They sometimes have very poor family relationships or no family relationships. And so to tell them that they have to stay within the YMCA, primarily in their rooms, because shared areas are out of bounds for some of the time, and staff will contact them a couple of times a day and make sure that they're okay and that they've got food and all of those things. Initially, the young people found it incredibly difficult, and we struggled to keep them at the YMCA. They wanted to go out, meet their friends, you know, do all the things they weren't supposed to be doing. Having said that, our staff have been absolutely amazing and worked incredibly hard, and we've actually so far got through the entire period with no positive COVID tests from any of our young people, which I think is testament to our staff, you know, doing their job. I think it has increased the loneliness and the isolation of our young people, and we've had to have that continual interaction with them to help them cope with that. The same with families. I think families bringing children into nursery have either been key workers who've had a heightened sense of anxiety and risk, or they're children of vulnerable families and are children in need or children, you know, on a plan. And I think that those families have needed a massive amount of reassurance, really. I think, you know, we've seen increased mental health issues in families as well as in our young people. We've had to give them reassurance that, you know, we are there, we are taking extreme care. Our staff have worked in shifts so that they didn't come in contact with each other, so we'd always got staff who'd been isolating for a period that could step in. It's been a big process to actually keep our staff safe and our children and young people safe. I think having excellent knowledge, I think our staff are well trained and have good knowledge, and I think we've tried to help them be as knowledgeable about the situation and the staff teams and the pandemic, etc., etc. And I think that's given trust to the young people and the families, that they feel they can trust us, and that's been a big reassurance for them. I think they felt like you know, they could turn to us and ask us questions and we would have the knowledge to answer them. So that's been really helpful to them. We've tried to provide safe spaces, so from our youngest children through to our teenage residents and the young people we work with in our youth groups. Our youth groups had to stop because we obviously couldn't be face to face with the young people in youth groups, but we've tried to stay in touch with the young people, you know, out and about in the street. And I think provision of a safe space, whether it's online or whether it's you know, at a social distance, has been really important for our all of our children and young people. We've seen lots of increases in challenges. So we've had increased challenges in family relationships. We've had young people on social media all the time, which has increased their pressure immensely. You know, it's bad enough under normal circumstances when they're doing other things, but social media has really taken them into another realm, and it's not improved their mental health, sadly. With our residents, we've seen a lot of higher risks in terms of gangs, in terms of sexual exploitation rearing its head. You know, in Ipswich, for example, pretty much the first, second week of the pandemic, we had drug dealers queuing up outside, waiting, to take advantage, really. So we've had to be very, very aware of those higher risks and work with all of our partners to keep them under control, and they've been quite serious. We've had domestic violence to deal with, we've had some child abuse, all of the things that under normal circumstances do have some pressure exerted from above. The pressure from above just disappeared in the pandemic, and it was a free-for-all. And so we've really had to recognise all those situations and be there for our families and children and young people in order to support them when they've had an issue in that way. And it's been quite difficult because their normal sort of systems that surround them have not been there. So where the families, for example, would know where to go, their social worker or whatever, those systems just sort of faded into the background for a while. And they're coming back now, but it's been a long time of not really having the support out there that they've had in the past. So I think they've coped, but it's been difficult for all of them. And I think they've perhaps learned a little bit about themselves as well, but some of them have taken advantage of the risky behaviour, and we are now going to have a stretch where we're going to have to try and get that back under control and really work with them to help them understand the risky behaviour is not going to lead them down a good path. So yeah, it's going to be a long haul. I think it's not going to be a quick fix.
That's I'm shocked at the number of threats and the diversity of threats that the people that you look after and you as an organisation are having to face. And the last question now, and it's the future. So, Rowena, what learning and challenges do you think will come from this outbreak?
Well, I think, again, like I was saying about the organisation, it's quite hard to predict the future of where we're at. I mean, we all thought we were going to lockdown, we'd come out in the summer, we'd all have a drink and go out for a meal, and all would be rosy. I think in reality we knew that wasn't going to be the case, but we wanted it to be because of the severity of the lockdown. And now we're starting to see that isn't going to be the case, and it probably won't be the case for very many months, and we're going to have to keep on like this. So I think that is a big challenge. I think to think that we are going to have to deal with all of these issues and problems for a very long time is a realization that's only just starting to bite. Coupled with that is that to deal with the increased risks, challenges, mental health, physical health, all of those things takes money. And in this time, money is disappearing. It's not just growing on trees. So we've applied for a number of funds over the summer, which we haven't got, and we've been told that they've been 10, 20 times oversubscribed for a bid, and you're very lucky if you are the one that comes out on top. So funding is going to be an issue. There's no two ways about it. We are, the NCVO have forecast a massive drop in voluntary sector funding, and we're starting to see it already, coupled with the fact that we fortunately in the YMCA had reserves that we could use for a circumstance like this. But if this carries on and we have to keep pulling on our reserves to keep us afloat, the reserves will disappear, and very many organisations have very small reserves or no reserves, and that's hit hard. And when we're forecasting about £300,000 loss at the end of March, which for us we feel like we're okay with that. In terms of initially we were forecasting more, but that eats into your reserves, and you can't put a funding bid in and say, well, actually, could you add another 20,000 on for our reserves, please? It takes a long time to build those reserves up, and so that's a concern for the future. I think if this carries on and we have to sort of keep on supporting elements of our work, from our own funds. I think we can learn a lot from this about the health of our staff, not just their physical health, I don't mean, but the whole staff team and the way we keep that staff team healthy and functioning well. I think we can look back and see what things have worked well and we can ask our staff how we've supported them and which bits worked well and which bits didn't work so well. We have our own mental health team, which normally works out in schools, does training, counselling, etc. But they've been working in-house with our staff as well to offer mental health sessions and support sessions, and I think that's something that we've learned has been very beneficial. So I think we'll probably keep that going. We do have an employee assistance programme which does offer counselling as well, and all staff are enrolled in that. So we do have some options for our staff in terms of keeping them, positive and collectively healthy. But we will learn from this. We've definitely learned that people can work from home, and that we can set up structures that allow for that, because some people like working from home, some people hate it, some people can't wait to get back in the office and socialise and be there, and other people have said, actually, I get so much more done working at home, it's really good, I like it, can I carry on? So again, it's a very flexible thing at the moment, and we're encouraging the staff who can work at home to carry on working from home at the moment. But there will come a time where we'll review all of that and see, what will happen in terms of working from home. I've learned that there's an immense amount of trust that can happen in an organisation, where normally you might not appreciate that trust. In this period, we've had to trust people. So we can have trust in our workforce, but we can also gain trust from our workforce, and that has a big effect on the culture of the organisation. So by living with that trust and engendering the trust, it will in the future, I think, make us a better organisation than we already are. And I think we're pretty good already, but I think this will just be a step forward in the way that we trust our staff to work and they trust us to look after them. I think we were reasonably stable as an organisation, but we need to reflect on how we can do even better than we've done so far. So that's something that I think that we will start to talk about as we move forward. Our communication, we've learned a heck of a lot about communication over this time, and not least communication on video. It's not quite the same as being in the same room as someone, but it's pretty darn good. And I think that we will carry on having Teams meetings and not making people drive from Peterborough to Ipswich and Ipswich to Lowestoft and Lowestoft to Cambridge. We cover a big area, and it's much better for the organisation and for people's health to be able to just dial into a meeting. So I think we'll probably give people the choice, so that if they want to be there in person, they can be there, but it will be completely acceptable to dial in as well. And I think we've learnt about partnerships and collaborative working as well. I mean, I think that we should always work in partnership with people. I think it's a good thing to do. I think that no one organisation has the whole entity when you're looking at something. I think there's always a bit here for someone and a bit there for someone, sort of slotting into the whole. And this has just made us think even more about what partnerships we should have, who are the partners that will be able to work well with us and us to work well with them, and what ways can we do it that it's not so rigid. Because rigid partnerships take a long time to set up, a long time to bed in, and then by the time you've done all of that, sometimes the partnership is almost approaching its end because it's we've done a lot of the work. So I think fluidity is a massive thing that we've learned through this time, that you can pull things together in a few days, that you can make it work, that you might be mindful of your risks. Obviously, you need to be watching your risks, but generally speaking, you can do it a lot quicker than we've been doing it. Not we as the YMCA, but we collectively have been doing it in the past. And I think I'd really like to have. I've talked about it before, but I think that I'd like to have level playing fields for everybody. So I always feel that the statutory sector take a bit of a parenting role, and the voluntary sector automatically slot into the child role. And what I'd actually like to see is adult to adult conversations that go across all sectors. So private sector, statutory sector, the voluntary sector, all of us having an adult conversation rather than someone taking the parent role and another one automatically taking the child role. And I think that would make us a lot more effective as we move forward, and there is no money to move forward with. There's no money in the statutory sector. There's no money in the voluntary sector. All of the preventative work and all of the early help stuff is going to fall by the wayside, because we're all going to be dealing with emergency firefighting situations, and that is not going to be good for the nation. So we have to start thinking collectively about how we can feed in private sector money, how we can utilise the statutory sector money effectively, and what the voluntary sector brings to the party.
Thank you, Rowena. It's a good note to end on, is to have a future of adult to adult conversations when we're tackling everything, all the challenges that we're going to face. That's been fascinating. Thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.